I got you. Yeah, everything's sounding good so far. So good.
Hey, just make sure you don't hit the stop button.
Yeah. Hey, that wasn't me. That was Mr. Ryan Sawyer, who's not here with us
How
today.
did you finally figure out how to post it?
Yeah, well, I ended up posting the previous ones in three separate parts, like I thought I was gonna have to.
I
But
got you. I got you.
I could have, I could have used some software to, I'm sure, turn it into one. But I just, you know,
Well, we
I had
probably
a.
need to figure out what the deal was because it's probably not the last time that's going to happen.
Oh no, without a doubt. Um, yeah, it. I mean, hopefully, technical difficulties don't happen over and over again, but I'm sure they'll pop up from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that being said, just to let you know, we are recording. So,
Excellent.
um, I'm gonna, for those of you listening, I'm back here in our little computer room slash office. So I'm gonna scoot around to my other spot, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, sometimes it's a pain when you have some slackers that don't show up and you have to be the producer and the button pusher and all this kind of stuff, uh, filling multiple roles at a time.
Yeah, we just hard to find good help nowadays, you know.
It certainly is.
Um, yeah. And Ryan, we're not at all talking about you. I'm just kidding.
Oh, of course not. Even though he's not here.
Yeah. No, but yeah, Ryan, I believe. Well, not I believe because I took him there, but Ryan is helping out with a church camp this week, which is important work too, or a youth, some sort of youth camp. So that is why he is not with us today. The Lord's work
That is
certainly
right.
comes first.
Absolutely.
Um, so I, man, I'm like, do I sound loud to you, or is it just to me? I sound kind of loud on here.
Oh, you sound pretty normal.
Oh, okay. Huh. I wish I knew how to turn my headphones down, but any anyway, I was looking at the news over the past couple of days, and I saw where uh, apparently um, we're not the only nation in the world with immigration concerns right now. I was really just looking up current events for stuff to talk about, and I came across something that said that Dutch Prime Minister steps down after the party leaves coalition over immigration proposals. So I noticed that the media is trying to make this out to sound like they don't want any immigrants whatsoever, but I have a feeling there's more to the story here. Just like with us, you know, people want to paint you as being anti-immigrant, and I'm sure that they have valid concerns over trying to properly screen people, but um, and to my knowledge, that's basically what we're attempting to do as well. So
Well, one of the things that you got to keep in mind is that regardless of whether we notice it or not, it's easy for us to stay in a bubble over here and think that what we do doesn't make a difference. But a lot of these other countries take the lead from us uh, on all kinds of policy, and when we have
excuse me.
made light of immigration, it trickles over into other nations too. And when they start running their nations like we do, uh, it can be bad.
Yeah. Um, I I can't remember what other countries, but even though this is about the Dutch government, I know there were. I'm sorry, y'all.
I need to come perform CPR there, Kevin.
No, I'm good.
Now, I
Yeah,
think
there
they're
were.
having the same problems right now in Great Britain. There's a lot of discussion about how uh, the Muslim nation, the Muslim believing people, are beginning to do a lot of takeover in that area. Not only trying to bring Sharia law and that kind of thing in, but they're also taking spots in the government as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I've heard about that sort of thing happening in England or Great Britain. I don't really know to what extent it's going on in other areas, but I have a feeling they see the struggles that we're going through and that Great Britain's going through, and they're probably, I'm sure, part of their clamping down has something to do with that. But and then too, um, I know that there's the conflict going on between Gaza and Gaza and Israel, and I want to say Syria's in bad shape right now as well. I think they experienced at least a partial government collapse recently. Um, and so all that being said, I'm sure there are plenty of migrants that do need asylum, and like I'm not anti-immigration, and many of us aren't like what the media wants to paint people as. It's just that you want to make sure that you are letting in people that aren't trying to turn things upside down,
That's right. You want to do things the right way, and we have laws for immigration. You got to make sure that you get at the end of the line for one thing. Go through all the paperwork, do these things, and make sure that you're being properly vetted before you come into the country. And all these other nations should do the same thing. And one of the things that's really hard right now, really not only in our nation but across the world, is that there's all kinds of viewpoints. And whenever you have half the people, in a lot of cases like here, that believe one way and half that believe another, well, about half of the time somebody's going to be upset about the way things are being run.
Yeah. Yeah, there definitely has to be a more organized process. I mean, you want to give safe haven to people where you can, but at the same time, just take our border with Mexico that's been discussed a lot. For the longest time, it's basically just been open, but the cartel's gotten so powerful, and you have terrorist threats from all angles that are potentially, literally and figuratively, ticking time bombs. So you have to, just in the modern world, you can't allow free, completely free travel back and forth like you used to could, just because it puts too many people at risk. And even if it weren't for just the toll on the economy and on workers, really the main thing that you have to account for is just public safety. To me, the main concern is what it's always been. You don't want to let in people that are going to do violence against other people.
That's right.
So I hope that gets better over time, but I also hope that the nations that these people are fleeing from, you hope that their governments can get it together, or that the people will, if your government can't get it together, I might get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, but get rid of your government. I mean,
that's right.
If the government can't do its job, get rid of it. I'm not going to tell you how to do that, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
That's right.
I mean, just look at how the United States got started. That was not a peaceful process,
but a necessary one.
Yeah, very necessary. Another thing I wanted to talk about today was switching over to sort of more investing related stuff. I noticed that I don't think I know we've talked about Buffett before, but I noticed he's right now sitting on a $347 billion cash position. So the reason I bring that up is um, investors, especially very experienced investors, it's very unusual for them to not be investing cash. So um, that to me is a pretty big red flag, uh, not only for our country, but for the economy as a whole, because somebody like him with the size that he has, he doesn't just invest in American companies, although I'm sure primarily he invests in American companies, but he also invests at an international level. So if he, to me, that says I'm not feeling super confident in the state of world affairs right now. So,
Do you attribute that to because I wouldn't expect that we were financially uh, near where we were, say, in '08, in those kind of times. But would you attribute that mainly to the state of the government's debt right now?
yeah, it, I'm thinking that is a large portion of it too. And I'm curious which one it is that weighs heavier. I'm sure the state of the government debt certainly has a lot to do with it.
Let me ask it this way: does it concern you at all personally that a person that big is holding on to that cash?
Oh yeah, I find it that's the whole reason I wanted to talk about it, because I don't want to make a habit of being like a fear monger type, but to me this is not only a red flag but a major red flag. And I mean, to be fair, I know he's been holding on to a cash position for a while, but like I said, it's highly unusual for somebody to have this large of a cash position for an extended period of time.
And also, could it have anything to do with the fact that he's stepping down at the end of the year?
Yeah, that may have a little something to do with it, but really and truly, I don't think that has quite as much to do with it, simply because he already has a guy that is, for all intents and purposes, sort of taking over his role and selecting investments for the company.
Well, does what I'm saying is, does this mean that he is having cash on hand to do other things, like he's walking away from Berkshire Hathaway, or what do you attribute that to?
I believe that it's a lack of confidence either in the pricing of our stock market or the irresponsibility of the government having so much debt and continuing to just not really do anything about that. I mean, we've and I can pull that up again. I know we spoke not too long ago about the national debt clock, and I'm sure we'll make a habit of talking about this. Um,
Well, and to be honest, and again, we don't know what he's doing with that money. We can speculate, but uh, also keep this in mind. I'm not disparaging. I'm just saying he's
mhm.
94 as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true too. It could have something to do with, like you said, him stepping down and that sort of thing. But what you have to understand about, especially professional investors, is they don't they don't even they become such. And I'm not trying to knock him. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, but when your whole life is revolved around being a company man, especially when it's your own company, they get to the point to where they view the events in their own life as being completely separate to what the company does.
Sure.
And so the point that I'm getting at with that is he would still prefer that money to be utilized responsibly. And when you just have such a large cash pile sitting around, um, it's just not the most responsible use of it, because inflation eats away at a minimum of 3% a year.
Mm-hmm.
But it can eat up as much as 15 and 20%.
Right.
Um,
We're swiftly closing in on 37 trillion.
hmm And as I've said before, people attribute that to be the main number, but then you go down and you look at Social Security and the U.S. total debt, and total debt, and I still think that this number is inaccurate. It says 104 trillion, but when I looked at it before they changed it to a new interface, and I remember at one point I looked at the old user interface and it said like 250 trillion or something around there. So
So we may have a little finagling going on.
yeah, however bad people think it is, and again, I'm not just trying to sound like negative Nancy, but it's worse. It's typically worse than people think, is kind of what I'm getting at.
I don't know what you're saying, Kevin. I know the government would never hide things from us.
Yeah, they've never been known to do that at all. And you can see like U.S. debt held by foreign countries. That's not as bad as I would have thought it was, but it's still a significant amount. That's over 9 trillion. U.S. trade deficit, 1.4 trillion. Um, but at least Doge is still going in the right direction. That's 504 billion, which is still a much smaller number than any of the trillions, but hopefully we can, like we've said before, continue to find ways to.
Well, one of the things that's really unreal that I find to be just atrocious is we're the richest nation in the world. We have been for quite some time. And yet we're probably the most in debt of any nation. And it's just and again, I'm not placing the blame on others and not on myself here. We're all in this together. But it's an attitude of selfishness that people are borrowing that much money.
Yeah. I mean, and part of the problem too is that so much of our society centers around encouraging people to get in more and more debt. It's, you know, banks and investors that would rather not take risk in stocks or real estate. I mean, the only other way to make passive income other than those two things for the most part is to try to give people money and then turn it into a debt proposition. So
Sure.
if you let's say you're a guy with, I don't know, 10 to 20 million dollars, and you don't, you think the market's too risky, you think real estate's too risky, and you're like, well, how else can I generate a return? Well, I can give this money to the bank, um, for something like a CD, or I can buy bonds, or I can start my own company and become a business lender. Um, I'm trying to think of some examples, but
Well, at the same rate, uh, even though you're doing those things that are supposed to be pretty safe, you're still dealing with the government when you're dealing with that money.
yeah, yep, and
And when times get tough and things crash, they don't have a good track record of saying, "Oh yeah, here's your money."
yeah, yeah. I mean, they, especially now, um, it's going to get more precarious for sure unless we start paying down some of that debt. And I know, again, we've talked about this before. I don't. People are never going to take well to the government spending less because it means that there are going to be cuts in certain things. But we're at a point, 100 over 120% debt to GDP is, anything over 100% is unsustainable. So
Just out of curiosity, could it be that Buffett just has more money than we know about, or is he not? I know you've spoken about this before about 70-30 rule.
yeah. Will remind me.
Well, he has a rule where he recommends that 70% of your assets are invested in equity, such as stocks, and 30% be allocated to like fixed income, like bonds and cash.
Yeah, he could be putting some of it to work in bonds and cash. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that's some of what he's doing. But typically, from what I know about him and other professional investors, is if they have a large cash pile sitting around like that, it's because they expect a crash somewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not telling you that none of us have a crystal ball. Like I can't predict any more than the next guy when some odd event's going to happen and the market's going to crash. But like I said, I can tell you he's sitting on almost $350 billion in cash. And as you know, I consider myself an expert investor as well. And if I had a quarter or more of my net worth just sitting on the sidelines, it would be because I was expecting to be able to, you know, invest that at least within the next year or two, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
All you got to do, go up a little bit. All you got to do is see right there where it says U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio. If you keep looking at that, that shows that we're spending nearly 23% every year more than we're bringing in.
yeah.
It doesn't take a genius to figure out which direction we're headed.
Mm-hmm. But it's it goes along with, you know, we can sit here and talk about this type of thing, but like a lot of what it comes down to is, you know, we keep talking about the potential trouble that we're in, but we've talked about, you know, political suicide before. No politician wants to be the guy that says, "Hey, we've got to claw back on Social Security," or we've got to, you know, and two, if they were to claw back something like that, then people are going to say, "Well, what about all the major corporate tax breaks that you're giving these big companies?" And then the discussion is going to come down to this total hidden wealth again, which is, you know, and again, how do we know where they're pulling? If it's hidden wealth, how do they know what the amount is? But anyway, it says 173 trillion in hidden wealth, and that could be a mixture of large companies, but it could also be just citizens not reporting all of their income too. You know,
Well, here's the thing. Unless these guys have billions of dollars in a coffee can in their backyard buried, they're not going to have access to this stuff anyway, if things collapse. And, those kind of things have to be considered.
yeah. No, I would. A lot of big companies and professional investors and investment banks for years have recommended that people be at least 5 to 15% in either hard assets or precious metals.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that the best way to hedge against a really bad economy or a really bad market crash is to abide by that rule. And a lot of people, as opposed to using that rule for the sake of precious metals, a lot of people are going into, I'm sure, Bitcoin and Ethereum and some of the other well-known cryptocurrencies. But to me, precious metals, although they, you know, of course, Bitcoin has gone wild over the past few years. I mean, I want to say the last time I checked, it was over $100,000 a Bitcoin. But precious metals have industrial uses, and you know, ultimately any kind of electronic currency, in my mind, somebody can find a way to potentially backdoor that or hack that. I mean, I don't fully understand the blockchain. I admit that. So I'm sure that the blockchain has safeguards that make it much more difficult to do something like that. But, you know, technology and artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly viable. And so who's to say in the future some super intelligent hacker can't find a way to backdoor one of these cryptocurrencies?
Mm-hmm.
I guess is my concern there. So whereas gold, silver, platinum. These metals are used in various industries, and I just think that they are a more reliable and less volatile
I know that
hedge.
sometimes it takes a while for effects to hit the market, but as far as Dow Jones goes, it's still up.
The Dow, yeah,
Yeah.
today it looked like the market was hanging in there today.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Closed up 214.
yeah, I'm gonna look and see how we ended up on the Nasdaq and the S&P. Um, S&P is up 0.58%, Nasdaq up 0.81%. So, I mean that's good, but compared to previous quarters and previous years, um, we've certainly been moving in a more odd direction
Mm-hmm.
than we have been here recently. The last little scare we had, it looks like, was in April.
Mm-hmm.
We dipped down, but then we're coming back up. But when you zoom, you zoom out for the long term, you see in what was it? Looks like we had some type of crash. I don't know, 99 to 2003, and then you had the 2008 crash,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have COVID in 2020. But the COVID crash didn't last long at all, and we popped right back up. So the point that I'm getting at with this is that if you look at the chart as far out as you can, it just every time we hit a new high, eventually it leads to another crash. So, and I'm not saying that we're guaranteed to have a crash, but I just that's the pattern that's been presented from the past. Um, hopefully we continue to roll along and nothing bad happens. But to me, like I said, the if we could get this 122% debt figure down, um, to if we could get that down to even 80%, we'd be in much better shape. So I don't, other than us being in too much debt, I don't see a valid reason as to why a crash would happen right now. But I see flags of major investors being scared to be too involved in the market, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have these professional figures that have been doing this for 30 plus years, and they're, you know, it's not normal for them to be hesitant. It's just not normal. They don't, they just don't scare easy. Um, so I say all that to say that I just, I want, I know some people in our government, like Trump and Elon, are taking this seriously, but two people taking it seriously is not enough. I mean, we need all of Congress and all of the Senate to take this seriously too.
Well, one of the things, and I know we've discussed this before, it just bothers me, is that there are many people with their hand out, and there are many people in the government who cater to those people with their hands out, and uh, they would rather take the ship down than to put their hand away.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's the thing you're up against. I mean, they would rather us collapse. So I mean, when you're dealing with that, it's kind of hard to to fight the battle of trying to find a fix for that and them. You know.
yeah, that's my main concern is they do have, of course, an obligation to their constituents that help them get elected. I understand that, but if the government collapses, then you're really going to be breaking your promises because they won't be able to they won't be able to produce on any of their promises is what I'm getting at. Like if the government collapses, people, I think everybody has this attitude of, it won't affect me, but yeah, it will. If the country becomes unstable and we turn into Somalia or Syria or I mean, it's going to affect every business in the country. Even if it doesn't immediately have some drastic financial consequence, it's going to have a safety and security consequence for the entire nation. And, you know, I just, it's hard to even paint that picture because we're across the ocean in our own little bubble over here. But, you know, I would encourage people to look up what happens when a government goes under. It's not pretty. Um, but anyway,
And if you look at the different states, they're kind of mirroring what's going on. Of course, Mississippi is the worst right now, but 46 out of every 100 people that are of working age are not in the workforce right now.
46 out of 100.
46 out of 100,
Whoa.
53.9% of our workforce is actually working. That puts a huge drain on those that are working as well.
Yeah, I saw something not too long ago that said that unemployment had gotten a lot higher. So now that has me curious as to what the unemployment rate is. Let me see. Yeah, and I know that's not, they always underreport what the real number is. The number that I saw was something like 20, 20 plus percent. And here this is saying the unemployment rate in the US is currently 4.2%. I can tell you that's wrong for a fact. Um, Bureau of Labor Statistics, they are probably as reliable as the FDA. So, um, yeah, it's certainly significantly worse than what they're reporting. And man, if we can't trust our media, we can't trust our government, we can't trust our companies. I mean, you know,
And a lot of times we can't trust our fellow man.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, thankfully we have God, but
No matter what is going on, it's still an uphill battle, and it will take, you know, doom across the board. And you hate to be that way. I don't, doomsayer, but doom across the board is inevitable if we keep heading in the direction that we're going.
yeah, we've got to make a turn for sure. Um, and so you know, if this is something that we have to bring up every episode, we will because this is important stuff. Um, but to move away from that for just a second, some other stuff that I've seen in the news recently is you know, besides just your Ukraine and Russia and Israel and Gaza conflicts, apparently there was a terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado the other day.
Yep.
Um, and I think I have that story pulled up somewhere. Let me find that. Um, well, I thought I had it pulled up. Um, oh, here it is. Hang on. It says man attacks Colorado crowd with firebombs. 8 people injured. Um, 8 people were injured on Sunday when a 45-year-old man yelled "Free Palestine" and threw incendiary devices into a crowd in Boulder, Colorado. Um, Now I know that this is this is another conversation that can get you in trouble, but we're gonna go into it anyway. um,
And
and
just so you can guess, maybe what religion he came from. His name is Muhammad Sabri Salman.
yeah, yeah, and I know a lot of people are afraid to talk about, as opposed to just criticizing, uh, Islam and some of the radicals within Islam. Everybody's also afraid to criticize Israel itself, and I'm gonna try to remain as neutral as I can when we talk about this and try to be in the middle. And so what I'm getting at with this is I've heard people say that free Palestine, that the rest of the saying is from the river to the sea, which would suggest the destruction of Israel, which is obviously a problem. But also, you have to we have to give Israel their due criticism as well. In that, I mean, what legitimate reason do you have to be bombing hospitals and killing women and children without any discretion? I mean,
Well, wrong is wrong. It doesn't depend on which nation does it. Uh, if there's criticism to go around for Israel, then they should be criticized. But the way you make your voice heard is not by burning other people.
oh yeah, I completely agree. Um, but I do,
That's the reason our Constitution guarantees peaceful protest.
yeah, that's definitely not a peaceful protest. But at the same time, though, I'm sure people that are living in Gaza are trying to flee Gaza. That I can understand why
Sure,
they would have trouble accepting that.
sure.
Um, but the reason I bring this up is this is just another thing that I I don't know. We've all got to continue to pray that a peaceful resolution is found. Um, but it and don't get me wrong, I know Israel and Palestine have been fighting for a long time. I mean, people think it's only for decades, but I mean, if you know your Bible, you know it's thousands of years that that this stuff's been going on. So, um, and I don't mean to. You hear me laughing. I'm not laughing that people are being hurt, but I'm laughing just because I don't know. It's just odd to me that this continues to be an issue over and over and over again. Um, you know, I just don't understand why people are so hateful towards other people. I just don't understand.
Yeah, this is, and these conflicts, of course, as you know, go back thousands of years. And uh, I just don't see a really viable solution to anything outside of the Lord's return.
Yeah. I mean, you know, yeah, I'm eventually that day is going to come. We don't know when it's going to happen. Hopefully it's still a ways off, but yeah, I mean, if you know your Bible, you know that, you know, it gives you a lot of perspective on why man has trouble resolving things himself, you know.
The report that I see says that he's been charged with multiple felony accounts, and the report that I have also shows, and numbers are going to fluctuate, but mine showed 12 injured. Mine
12
shows
injured.
12 injured.
Okay.
But um, of course, these are going to be federal charges because any kind of terroristic charge is a federal charge.
Yeah. Yep. I imagine he's going to be in deep water for sure.
He came into the country in 2022, and his visa expired 2 years ago, so he was here illegally.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, and I mean it just seems odd to me for somebody that's, and I guess age really doesn't matter, but I don't know why, for some reason, him being 45 years old, it just seems odd that he would one day decide to go out and launch a firebomb into a crowd.
And had come here. He's an Egyptian national who had come here seeking asylum,
Mm.
and is now here causing trouble.
Yeah, that sounds a little sketchy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
He's been charged with multiple felonies and federal hate crimes charge.
huh. Yeah, it says the incident comes amid heightened tensions over Israel's war in Gaza. And they always point back to the war in Gaza as the reason for this sort of thing going on. But and again, I'm not trying to negate Israel's, you know, hostility towards the Gaza Strip, but at the same time, Israel would never have gone into Gaza had it not been for what was it, October 7th, where I mean, what was it, like 1,000 people were killed, 1,000
Mm-hmm.
Israelis were killed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's you can only cry so much wolf when you were the one that started the incident in the first place.
That's right.
And if we really want to get nasty here for a second, let's think about if you had to move your family to another location from the United States and you were deciding, are we going to move to Turkey? Are we going to move to Gaza? Are we going to move to Syria? Or are we going to move to Israel or some country in Europe? What would you pick? Let me ask you that.
I I'm not sure you could choose either one of anything that you mentioned and be safe.
Yeah, but like, well, let's narrow it down to two. If you had to choose between moving your family to Gaza or moving them to Israel, what choice would you make?
Oh, of course, Israel.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at is that if you cry wolf, but your nation has a history of being inhospitable and hostile, what does that say about you?
That's right. Well, you know, unless you have weapons from Iran, which sometimes they provide, uh, Gaza's going to protect you with rocks
Yeah.
if they protect you.
Well, in
Um,
even if you went to, let's say, a more stable area other than Gaza, say you went to Syria or you went to the United Arab Emirates or Egypt or any of these other places, if I told you you can pick one of those places or go to Israel, I'll bet you'd probably still say Israel. Or am I wrong?
Probably so. And here's the thing: there's really no way of getting around this. And I know that you've already hit on this subject, but any nation that is predominantly Muslim is they at least have a sour attitude toward the West and the white man, and uh, it's hard to go to these nations and get a fair shake.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, this could we could turn this into way more of a conversation than we have time for because obviously we have the global war on terrorism where we were in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 plus years, but
And trust me, I'm not saying that all those who claim the Muslim religion are like that, but many of them are.
yeah, the thing is you can't allow the radicals within your religion to be in control.
Sure.
Is part of what I'm trying to get at. Like
Right.
it would be like Christians allowing either the KKK or uh I don't know, Freemasons or some super far right loosely Christian whatever our equivalent to ISIS is, we don't allow them to control things in our nation.
Sure.
Is and so countries with an Islamic background, they just have to learn that you can't allow the violent crowds within your religion to take over your society.
Right.
I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. Um, so I mean, there, and it's a shame. I'm sure some places are getting better.
Well, it would be like just to your point earlier. They are an extremely small faction now, but it would be like you were talking about allowing uh, the white supremacists who claim to be Christian to control what goes on in our nation.
Yeah,
We would never allow that, and those factions are extremely small compared to what they used to be. However, yeah, we wouldn't let them dictate policy any more than I expect the Muslim nations to allow the extremists to dictate their policy.
yeah, and I mean, even though, a lot of the stuff that we talk about sometimes has negative undertones, I still consider myself to be a glass half full kind of guy, an optimist, even though it doesn't sound like it at times. But I would love to be able to travel to many of these places and, you know, not have to be concerned about
Oh,
being
absolutely.
kidnapped and held for ransom.
Well, and at one time you could.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that we can't go to some of these countries now is that when these things started creeping in, no one said anything, and they just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now in some places they're the majority. You know,
Yeah. So yeah, I've never seen Egypt. I would love to go to Egypt. I know they've got some beautiful places in Egypt. I'd love to see Iraq because, um, I know that there are some ancient civilizations that used to exist in that area. I want to say Mesopotamia is what it maybe was called thousands of years ago. But
I would love to go to the old city of Ephesus in Turkey and see the supposed tomb of John the Apostle.
oh, Turkey's got a lot of beautiful stuff too. I'd love to see Turkey too. Um, I saw something the other day, and I can't remember what the name of the site was called, but they have some sort of carvings in the cliffside that you can tell are just old, like where people had
Mm-hmm.
um, almost created like living spaces inside of the cliff or mountain.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to travel to some of these places. So I hope that moving forward we can find ways to, I don't know, achieve more peace with these nations or be more at peace with these nations. But
Right.
um, let's see. Yeah, so I guess um we can, since we're talking about religious cultures, um it's probably been a couple episodes since we've read a scripture. So the Bible scripture that I had down for today is First Peter 4:10. It says, "As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace." Um, and the reason I selected this verse for today is just, to me, this is another example of being a good person and using what you're given responsibly. Um, Chris, do you have any additional opinions on
Well, if we looked
that?
at our income, anything that we receive like that, anything that we have, as another parable from God, that it's things that He has given us to invest, that it doesn't belong to us, that it does belong to Him,
Mm-hmm.
and we are deciding how much to keep for ourselves, how much to help others with. It puts things in a different perspective, and ultimately that's what they are. Things that the Lord has blessed us with are things that He has given us to take care of for Him, and it would behoove all of us to look at those things more along those lines.
Yeah, people give Dave Ramsey a hard time, but one of the I don't agree with everything that he has to say, but one thing that I do like that Dave Ramsey has to say a lot is you'll hear him say that the wealth that he has, he doesn't consider to be his. He considers it to be God's, and he's just temporarily in charge of being a good steward of it.
That's right.
And so I think that if the entire world adopted that viewpoint, we would live in a much better world.
And the problem is, and we've talked about this in the past before too, but the problem is too many people have an emphasis on their monetary things and their material goods as being the ultimate goal that they're shooting for, and that's what gets everything out of whack.
Yeah. Um yeah, no, I agree. Um did you, if not it's okay and we can do it another day, but uh is the Ahab and Jezebel thing fresh on your mind at all, or
In what regard?
I just mean like, did you Did you have a chance to look over that at all or read that in here?
Well, I know about them pretty good.
Yeah.
What would you like to know?
um. Yeah. This is. I guess this is going on to a whole nother topic, but um, now that I'm on social media far more than I want to be, I guess where I'm going at with this is I noticed that there's a lot of dissension between men and women, or it seems like it's a little worse modern day than it used to be.
Sure.
Men blaming women for things, women blaming men for things.
Hmm.
So,
Well, you can look at that example alone and see that, uh, you know, ultimately, who was ruling the nation at that time? It was Jezebel, who should have been ruling the nation at that time. Well, Ahab was the king, right?
mm-hmm,
And that shows right there. I mean, he could, a king basically could do whatever they wanted to do. Uh, I'm not saying he should have done this, but he could have looked at his guard and told him to kill his wife, and they would do it. Now, that's how much power he had, and um, he was actually a very weak king who was led around by the nose by his wife, and many times she led him into evil decisions, and he just went right along with it. It doesn't make it right, but I kind of look at this situation the same way that I do Adam and Eve. Adam had a chance to say no to Eve, but he didn't,
mm-hmm.
and they were kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. And the reason I ask that is because I feel like a lot of people take these uh take these events sort of out of proportion, and that they think that, you're putting all the blame on the woman. And what we're saying here is that no, it is both the man and the woman's fault, but it's arguably even more so the man's fault for not stopping the behavior or the event.
Well, our, if you go by the Bible, which we do, we go by our God-given roles. There are certain roles that are given to men, certain roles that are given to women, and it has nothing to do with their value. God values us all the same. However, He put men in charge of a lot of things, and they're just not taking those roles seriously, nor are the women taking their roles seriously, and that's what the problem is.
Yeah. And we can get into another conversation about should women be only staying at home or should they be working. I don't, obviously in the modern world most of us don't have an issue at all with both men and women being in the workforce, but you know, traditionally speaking,
Regardless of what you have to do, and I know there are some families that have to do that to survive. However, it has played an enormous role in the downturn of the quality of families that women have had to work outside the house.
yeah, I mean it's not that they I think a big misunderstanding in modern society is that people think that they are less than if they don't go out and get a job and work. And I mean, the cost of living obviously is atrocious today, so you understand why people are having a problem
Sure.
with somebody staying home, but you can definitely see the cause and effect of, you know, what it's doing to the family, eating away at the family unit. Um, because although you gain more resources when you're both out in the workforce, what you lose is, now you have to hire a daycare, hire somebody to, if you have kids, to watch them. And you don't know, you could find the best daycare or the best person in the world to watch your kids, but it's not the same as you watching and raising your kids.
No question.
Um, so I just,
Well, and it has been said often enough, and it can't be said. It can't be said enough, really. I guess I should say. Uh, if you don't raise your kids with your values, somebody else is going to raise them with their values. Uh, people don't look at it that way, but the amount of time somebody else spends with your child, and they have different values, it's going to affect them.
yeah. And, guys, just in case you're wondering, or if you never ran across this biblical account of Ahab and Jezebel, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you can find it in First Kings 16, I believe is where it starts. It may, uh, but anyway, and you can always do a Google search yourself. But I would, those of you that are listening, I would highly encourage you to um, look into that Bible account because it's an important one. It'll shed a lot of light on. I mean, really, of course, the entire Bible will shed a lot of light on what's happening today. But if you notice a lot of disagreement between men and women, and you know the divorce rate's crazy, this is one of those uh, stories that'll, I think, shed some light on that for you. And you know, again, I want to emphasize here that I'm not. It's no one person's fault. It's if and like I said, if anything, it's more the man's fault than it is the woman's fault. But we just we can't allow society and the media to twist God's intention for us. Um, I guess is mainly what I'm trying to say. Don't don't let others influence you into a life that you don't believe in just because you think you're not with the times, you know. Um, yeah, just I'm sure you've heard people talk about the importance of the nuclear family. Um, and you know, I firmly believe that the nuclear family is the way to go.
That's
Um,
right.
and maybe, you know, I know, like I said before, I know we have a lot of listeners in internationally in India. And so I don't know to what extent you guys experience these issues in the modern day, but in the West, it has certainly become a big problem, especially with people my age and younger. Um, they just men and women just have trouble getting along like they used to, I guess. And that's unfortunate. And I hope that changes over time. Um, I guess before we close out, we can. I don't know what time we're at, but I want to say we're somewhere around the 50-minute mark,
We're close to an hour.
close to an hour. Okay. Um, we've we've talked about the stock screener a few times before. Is there any, let's say, you know, we've talked about Tesla and some others before. Is there a smaller company that you can think of that you'd like to take a look at?
Mm, about Walgreens.
Walgreens. Let's check them out. The funny thing is, they've dropped a lot in value, but they shouldn't be. Let's see. WS. The ticker symbol, just in case you're curious, those of you listening for Walgreens is WBA. And it's listed on the American NASDAQ. It looks like right now, Google is saying that Walgreens is worth 9.72 billion, and on the stock screener, it says that it is trading at 39.8% below estimate of fair value, which means that it's considered pretty cheap right now. Um, but the other interesting, and in case you're wondering what the stock screener is called, we're using a stock screener called Simply Wallstreet. Um, there's a section for risk analysis, and it tells us that there has been significant insider selling over the past 3 months. So even though it's cheap, typically if insiders are doing a lot of selling, that can be a little odd. Ideally, you want investors to be buying, but the good thing about this is down here where it says ownership breakdown, apparently individual insiders still own 17.2% of the company. So that's a good chunk of ownership. That makes me feel a little bit better about it. Um, it looks like institutions own about 61%, and then general public, like you and I, owns about 21%. Um, Another interesting thing that you can see with this screener is it'll show you some of the top shareholders. Like you can see BlackRock owns nearly 7% of it, of course. You'll see BlackRock in pretty much every public company in the Vanguard group. And what a lot of people, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not defending BlackRock or Vanguard, but I think what a lot of people misunderstand about this is this doesn't necessarily mean that the BlackRock firm itself owns this. What it means is they buy these shares on behalf of their wealthy investors. So typically, when you see something like this, it means that whatever billionaire or multimillionaire that has an account with them, some of the money that they're investing for those guys is going into some of these companies, if that makes any sense. Um, let's see what else it tells us about Walgreens. It says debt is not well covered by operating cash flow. So the valuation is good. It's at a discount. It looks like future earnings potential is decent, but the health of the company, it looks like, is a bit of a red flag right now. So yeah, so here, one of the problems with Walgreens is the debt to equity ratio currently is 110%. So we were just talking about the national debt clock, about the United States being at a uh, GDP to debt ratio of 100, or well, excuse me, a debt to GDP ratio of 120. So Walgreens is almost matching the national debt to GDP ratio
Wow.
with their debt to equity ratio. It's, to me, debt to equity ratio is the company equivalent of um debt to GDP
Sure.
as far as a nation goes. So
It,
um
it's hard to, because you don't look at these entities as, it's hard to look at them like us, like the like the nation, but and you don't think about these different large corporations having debt.
yeah. No, they do, and they have a lot of it. And you have a lot of people that argue, well, when it's invested in assets, it's leverage and not debt. And that's true, but you still have to keep it under wraps. You can't just let it get out of control. And it certainly should never be above 100%. I mean, it's, now that being said, when it comes to buying your first home or something like that, of course you're going to be a little bit underwater until you build some equity in your home. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as a company that's making millions or billions of dollars, to have that kind of debt to equity ratio, to me, is kind of ludicrous. Um, but I mean, maybe it'll get better over time. I actually thought about buying shares in this one myself not too long ago, but the debt stopped me. And then another thing that stopped me was I noticed that, and I can't remember the name of them. Maybe I can find it, but the last time I looked at it, it sounded like somebody was trying to buy them out. Um,
Like a takeover.
yeah, Walgreens
Hmm.
Boots Alliance enters into definitive agreement to be acquired by Sycamore Partners. Now that's dated March 6th. So Boots chairman more than doubles stake in Walgreens amid $10 billion take. Yeah, so sounds like Sycamore Partners is still planning on taking them over. Um, so I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see if the ticker symbol changes or if the name changes.
Well, I'm sure that anytime a takeover is mentioned, that makes investors wary as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people take it as a good thing because it they think it means that the share price will go up until it gets bought. But since I'm a long term investor and most experienced investors are long term investors, I would prefer to not get bought out because
Did you see what it says there at the bottom though? Right before it cuts off.
Which one?
Right there, this is 3 weeks ago. Boots chairman doubles stake in Walgreens, a mid-$10 billion takeover.
Yeah.
Sycamore Partners will complete its acquisition of Boots, owner Walgreens Boots Alliance, um, and turning it into a private company, it says.
Oh, I didn't see the private company part. Yeah, so that tells me right there why I don't want anything to do with it. Because well, I mean, I'm sure that people that are holding shares are they're gonna get paid for whatever the current value of the company is. But why would I take the risk right now?
Yeah, but apparently, I mean, I wouldn't say, people wouldn't dump a bunch of money into a company and take it back private if they didn't think it was worth it.
Yeah.
So apparently, they think they can make money with it.
Oh yeah. No, it's pharmaceuticals is going to continue to make money for sure. But my thing is like, if I'm going to buy shares, I want to be able to hold on to them for a long time, collect the dividend, and see some price per share appreciation. And if they go private, basically my understanding is the current public owners, they're going to pay you for your shares and then push you out. And I don't want to get pushed out. If I'm investing in something like that, I want to be in it for the long term. Um, but to, if we wanted to go back into ethics, I don't, and this is just my opinion. I mean, everybody's free to their own opinion, but I'm also not crazy about the ethics of the pharmaceutical industry. So I just, you know, ever since we got what is it, RFK in charge of our health department,
That's right.
and
Health and Human Services.
yeah, and more people started talking about the evils of the pharmaceutical industry and the FDA. You know, I just I've sort of made a decision to stay away from this sort of thing. But all that being said, it can definitely still continue to be a profitable business. But you know, when this thing goes private, most people aren't gonna be able to partake in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this does make me curious about whoever this Sycamore Partners Group is. That's not a name that I know well, so um, I don't know if that's just like a few private investors that threw together a company, or if that's some really large private company. I don't know. That's one thing about how things work in the United States is companies that are publicly listed, you can learn a lot of information about. But if it's a private company that's not listed on the exchanges, it's difficult to learn much about it because they don't have the same Securities and Exchange Commission regulations that public they don't have the same obligations that they have to meet that publicly traded companies do, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Um but yeah, uh if it weren't for them getting acquired and being taken private, I would say that would certainly be an interesting one to have on your radar. But that,
Now, we had looked at this not long ago and saw that they were being taken over, or that they were about to be, but I didn't know they were going private.
yeah, if it weren't for the going private thing, I might would be a little bit interested in it. But I knew that there were a couple things stopping me, and I just couldn't remember off the top of my head what they were. And I guess those two things were,
That would be the main one.
yeah, yeah, those the debt and the
Kind of hard to invest in a company that won't take your money.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. I wonder if that. You think we're at about an hour now?
Yeah, we're a little over.
Oh, okay. Well, guys, I guess that's gonna probably do it for us today. Um, appreciate you joining us.
Enjoyed it. It's so funny that